Today I'm going to be going over things I absolutely hate about my Acura Integra. Hey guys, my name's Logan or Cream Tag, and today, we're just going to be going over some things that are pretty common, things that aren't exactly fun about Integras. Now don't get me wrong, I love my Integras, that's why I have 3 of them, and they're great cars. However, they do have their own little gimmicks and issues that just about every Taggy owner is going to have to go through and deal with, and I'm going to be going over those issues today and telling you exactly what some of the most common ones are. Alright, so the first issue, and this is going to relate purely to like the LS owners, so those are people who have RS, GS, or LS Integras, and that's the fact that they didn't come with a VTEC. Now, I understand the whole idea of having, base models, lower entry level cars, and then having higher ones that are more expensive like the GSR and the Type R that are a more performance car. However, one thing I have found, even though the base model is a ton of fun, I've owned 2 of them and I do really enjoy them. However, after owning a GSR, I found that these cars are really lacking in terms of the top end power. I found that with the GSR with VTEC and having another 1000 RPM before you hit redline, it really gives that car an extra bit of oomph that it didn't have before. And previously, in my other Integras, whenever you get to redline and you shift, it feels like there should be more there. It feels like it's missing something, and I found that VTEC is that thing that is missing. Personally, I think it would have been great if the car came with maybe a slightly different type of VTEC. Maybe it's a little bit more toned down. Maybe it's VTEC, but it's not a high compression engine, similar to how Acura did it with the RSX and the RSX Type S. I think that if it maybe came with even just the slightest little bit of extra oomph at the end, it would really be a lot more satisfying and really good for a lot more top end power. From that, another issue with power, honestly, that's the biggest thing that the car is lacking, is power. Now, I wouldn't say that it needs a lot more because it is still a lightweight chassis and it's supposed to be a more handling car, not a straight line car, but I really think it would have done the car a lot better if it had a turbo from factory. Now, this wasn't uncommon for Japanese car manufacturers at the time to be making these cars with turbos. You have Nissan with like the SR20 is a very famous engine that came in a car that was a bit more of an affordable approach to a lower power sports car that was still affordable. 240s, not so much anymore, but for the longest time, 240s were everyone's entry level drift car. Do I think the car needed much more power? Not at all. I think that if it had a turbo and made low 200s in terms of horsepower, I think that would be a lot better. It doesn't need to be pushing a lot of boost and it doesn't need to be a massive turbo, but I think that that would make a really, really big difference on these cars, and it's the reason why it is so incredibly common for people to boost these engines, is because they can handle it. They do kind of need that little extra push. The next big issue that I have with Integras, and something that Honda really screwed up with from kind of like the 70s to like the late 90s, early 2000s, and that's the metal they used to build their cars. Honda, when they built these cars, they built their cars to be able to withstand the climates in Japan, which they did fairly well. They still rusted, but they lasted a lot longer over there than they did in North America. And when they made them for the North American market, they didn't change up like the type of metal they were using or how they made the cars. And because of road salt that gets used in snowier climates and a lot of other things, it causes these cars to rust out super quick. It is very common to find a Integra with a completely rusted out quarter panel. It's common to see the rockers totally gone, and it's super hard to find these cars in a condition where they have decent paint and are rust free for a reasonable price. It's just not a thing anymore. So that's one thing that I dislike about these cars, just how easily they rust. I really wish that they were made with a better metal, but at the end of the day, it just comes down to knowing exactly what kind of condition your car is in and maintaining it so that it stays in good shape. Now, the next one is something that I don't actually hear getting talked about a lot, and that's the road noise. These cars were made to be, an eco car, but also, a sports car, especially the GSR and Type R were more race influenced. Something that these cars just didn't really have is great sound deadening or sound insulation inside the car. I took my Cream Integra on a 6,500 kilometer road trip, and I gotta say, it was loud. And I'm not just talking about the exhaust, because I did have an aftermarket exhaust, but just the road noise in general. You really hear a lot. And there are definitely ways to minimize this. You know, I've seen a lot of people do aftermarket sound deadening. I've seen people use aftermarket seals in the doors and things like that to help really keep the car comfortable in terms of the noise that you're hearing. However, I think it would have been a lot better if Honda maybe put a little bit more work into making the interior of the car a little bit quieter. Now, the next thing that is a fairly big issue with these cars, this is going to be only for the 98 to 01 Integras, because the pre-facelift, so those of you who have a 94 to 97, aren't going to have this issue, and that's the trunk actuator. The reason why the pre-facelift version doesn't have this is because they actually had a trunk latch inside the car. You pulled on the trunk latch and it opened up the back, so no issue at all. But if you had a post-facelift, almost all of these Integras, the trunk actuator is broken. All the ones I've had have been broken. I mean, of course, other than the GSR, because it is a 96, so it's got the release inside the car like normal cars with trunks. But my GS Integra and my Cream Integra, both of them, their actuator is broken, and I've heard a lot of stories about people going to try and fix it. Basically what happens is you just have to replace the whole trunk. That's what I've heard. That's really the only way to fix it, and sourcing a trunk that will have a working actuator is near impossible. There is a workaround, of course. It's not so bad that you'll just never be able to get into your trunk again. Of course, that wouldn't be very ideal. What you have to do is you have to get out of your car, you have to use your key, and you have to turn the key over, and then while you're holding it over, you have to lift up on the trunk. A lot of people don't understand it. A lot of people will get confused by it, but that's how it works. You have to do that. And it may sound like, oh, that's not a big deal, but I can tell you one thing. Typically when you're getting into your trunk, it's because you gotta put stuff in your trunk. And if you're holding something in one hand, you can't use it to open your trunk, you gotta turn your key over. It's not that big of a deal, but it's annoying enough that I feel like it's worth mentioning in this video. If I could change that, I would have just kept going with what they did with the first pre-facelift, where they just did it inside the car. Works much better. You can still use the key just the same to unlock it, and it's just so much easier. I much prefer it, having had both. The pre-facelift version is just much better. All right, the next thing that we're gonna be going over is theft. Now, these cars are very similar to Civics in terms of how they are made, how they're built, how they're constructed, and Civics are one of the most stolen cars in North America. Because Integras and Civics are so incredibly similar, almost identical in how their locking and security mechanisms work, I'm gonna kind of use the statistics on them interchangeably, just so I have a bit more, I guess, to share with you guys on that. They're very stolen cars. My first car was a 2000 Civic Si. It was stolen, never recovered. My first car, the locks worked, everything worked, but it was so incredibly easy to break into. There was a number of times where I locked my keys in the car, and I used mailbox keys, house keys, I used other people's car keys. I was able to get into my car. I broke into it a number of times because I locked my keys in there and I didn't want to have to call for a locksmith, so I just got into it myself. It's super easy, and the ignition is typically the same way. The ignition is typically a little bit more difficult to get at, but it's still quite easy, and because of it, these cars are stolen so much. Now, there are a number of things you can do to prevent your car from getting broken into, and I'm actually not going to go into that because I posted a video a few weeks back going over a ton of different ways on how to make an Integra theft proof using things that I've done in the past and a lot of other things that other people have done to make their cars near impossible to steal. So yeah, these cars are super commonly stolen, so you got to really be careful about that. Now, these next two things are pretty common for most 90s era Hondas, and the first one is going to be bumper sag. Now, you see it all the time, the front and rear bumpers where it will kind of sag, and it makes it so that your bumper fitment and your body lines just don't line up properly. It's such a pain, it's annoying. It is pretty common to see saggy bumpers. Now, there are people out there who have made kits in order to fix this. However, it is going to be something that you are going to see pretty often if you're looking for these cars, so keep that in mind. They sag and they just don't line up as well as they did when they came off the factory line. Now, the last and final thing that I'm going to mention that I dislike about Hondas is the fact, there's two things really, the fact that they burn and leak oil. Super common, almost every Honda does, especially the burning oil part. This is kind of a normal thing from factory almost. It's not super uncommon, and it doesn't mean that your car is in bad shape. It just means that it's a Honda, really. I've gotten lucky with some cars. My GSR burns very, very little oil, next to nothing, and my GS burns nothing at all, which is really, really great. But it is a common issue, and it is something that you will see, so make sure that if you are looking to buy a Honda, or if you own a Honda, make sure that you check your oil regularly. Not just every time you do an oil change, maybe just every time you fill up, every other time you fill up your car with gas, check your oil. Doesn't hurt, takes 3 seconds, you can do it while the car is filling up, and it is definitely something that's gonna save you, because if you run your car out of oil, even though it's a Honda, eventually the engine's not gonna last. So yeah, that's kind of it for today. Those are kind of the things that I dislike about my car. Now, I did do another video a little while ago why you should buy an Integra, and I'm gonna stick with what I said in that video, and that these are honestly one of the best cars that you can buy as like a beginner car enthusiast, and even as a car enthusiast who's been in this scene for decades. They're really amazing cars. They've got a lot of aftermarket support, and they take power really well. They're super fun, super cheap, and they're just a blast to drive. If you're looking for a really good project car, this is one. Regardless of everything I said in this video, they're all little minor things. They all have solutions, and they're still really great cars at the end of the day. As always, thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. There's a lot of you guys that watch the videos but aren't subscribed. It would really help out the channel if you drop a sub. It's totally free, and you can always change your mind later. If there's any other videos or any other topic that you would like me to go over or cover, let me know in the comment section down below. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.